couple of public service announcements. Number one, if you're watching this, you're going to see a bunch of black dots behind Jimbo. And the reason for that is because we tried to put up soundproofing, but we ordered it from Amazon, and the installation process on this is a little bit too cheap. So we put it all up.
Wasn't very clear either.
We put it all up 2 nights ago, and it fell all off in one day. So now you'll see some black dots, but it is a work in progress, and I feel like we've made some pretty solid audio improvements for this podcast. And I also feel like we've just been putting in the grind this whole time.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And our goal is to be able to post consistently, and we haven't been able to post consistently, but that's okay. We're going to get there. It's just all a matter of trial and error. Anyway, take it over. Your host today is the director of listener experience of the podcast. His name is Ryan Jim. He's sitting right across from me.
AKA Jimbo.
AKA Jimbo. He's my best friend in the entire world. He means so much to me. He's one of the people that have always made me a better person, and he just does this out of the goodness and the why. He just believes in our why and in safeguarding and keeping Indigenous oral history. So go for it, man.
Well, thank you for the warm welcome. I much appreciate it. This is my I guess our second podcast. We've done like a little mini podcast series before during the middle of COVID, but this is definitely more formal and a lot better. We've much more planning involved, so it's been fantastic so far. We can just jump right in. So today's podcast is all about meeting your host, and your host, Riel Drury. So we're just gonna have a series of questions here, and then we're gonna go and discuss it and just kind of go from there.
Introduce yourself first, man.
Yeah. So my name is, as you mentioned, my name is Ryan Jimbo. And I've been friends with Drake since I think 6-7 years now. And we met in our business 201 class at the school that we go to at Simon Fraser. We start at 2 instead of 101. It's kind of weird. But we met, and I just remember like the first, he's a kind man, so great. And I remember the first thing, I think he came up to me and he says, "Hey man, we got to start a business one day." And I'm like, I like this guy. Everyone else is like, "Hey, let's talk about the work and everything." And we talked about businesses and business plans. We've had many, and it was great. And I think we talked about that more than the school material or the class material, where we tried to apply it as best as we could. But
tell them what you really actually thought about your first impression. Tell them the full story.
I don't even fully remember, man. I just remember that you're like a manager at McDonald's, right? Yeah. So I just remember it was like this guy from Mission, BC comes in, and he's just talking about, "Oh yeah, I've had so much experience in business. I was a manager at McDonald's and everything." And then it was weird. I was like, I didn't think too much about it. You definitely talked a lot. Yeah, I'm like keeping it nice here for all the guests. But and then I just remember you just came up to me and you're like, "Hey man, you seem cool." It's like, essentially it was just like, let's start a business. Let's just like talk about business topics and ideas and what's pretty cool and what's trending right now. And I was like, I really like this guy. It was really cool because everyone else just talked about class material or things like that. And I think just this was like kind of just caught my eye. I was like, oh yeah, well, we are in business school too. So
yeah, totally. And just for context, like, so my full name is Drake Riel Drury, and I don't exactly know why my first name was put on my birth certificate as Drake. When I was growing up, my family always called me Riel. Like everybody always called me Riel. I only kind of like started introducing myself as Drake when I got to university, and it just kind of always felt just like a tad bit foreign to me at all times. So eventually, like once I started working back at Fraser Health, where I work right now, I just switched it back. I was like, okay, like my other best friend, like Gavin, was like, "Can you just change it back, man? Because like there's not a chance that I can call you Drake ever. Like there's not a chance." So yeah, my name is Riel.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm calling you like Riel more now too, which is, I think it's good. It goes back to your roots as well.
Where are you from, Jim?
I was born and raised in Vancouver, BC. My father's from Hong Kong, but he came here. I'm technically second generation, but he came here when he was young. My mom also came here when she was young. She was she was born in Fiji, but she's from mainland China. And my grandparents on that side wanted to start a business there, so they moved and immigrated to Fiji, and then they slowly made their way to Canada. So they both went. They did elementary. Both my parents went to elementary school here and went to high school. And even though it's weird because I'm technically first generation, it doesn't really feel like that. But yeah, no. So yeah, that's pretty much about me and everything.
And then I guess just to introduce myself so my name is Riel Drury. I'm Cree-Métis my family's from Red River, Manitoba. I was actually born here in White Rock. I was born I wasn't born, but I was raised in Mission, and I grew up there for until I was 18 years old. Then I moved into the city after that. But in terms of my Indigenous side, it's all through it's mostly through my dad's side. My mom, she might have a little bit of Mi'kmaq in there because her dad is from Newfoundland. He's from Conn River. And there might be a little bit in there, but we're not too sure. But on my dad's side, both of his lines are run through Manitoba. His mom's name, my grandmother's name is Bernice Prue. And the Prues run right back to the Red River Resistance. So really, really in the heart of the original Métis people in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, across the prairies pretty much. How I'm related to Louis Riel, which is why I was named Riel in the first place, was my great five greats grandmother, Josette Lagimodier. Her sister Julie Lagimodier is Louis Riel's mother, and then the Prues just go all the way down the line, and that's through my dad's maternal side. On my dad's Drury side, so his father's side, his grandmother Mary, she was a Cree person from Manitoba. That line kind of got mixed in with the Drurys who were white. I believe they're actually originally from Germany, sort of that area, and then the John Drury originally moved to Green Bay, and then eventually came up to Manitoba. So that's kind of how I myself am Indigenous. And then when I was growing up, I was raised pretty much traditionally Cree, just from the walkout. I mean, my dad struggled with alcoholism for the majority of his life, and then he found his culture through attending sweat lodges, and that's kind of what he's looking for. And if he tells the story, he always talks about how when he came back to his culture, it was always just what he was looking for. So, I mean, for me personally, my first sweat lodge ever was I was 5 years old, and I was attending Métis harvest dinners and dances. My first sun dance that I ever attended, I was 6 years old, and I attended sun dance my whole life. Ceremony's always kind of been a really, really big part of my life, and it still is.
I guess sorry to interrupt here, but I guess for those who don't know, could you explain what a sweat lodge is and what is a sun dance?
Yeah, I don't really hold I don't hold any of the teachings myself to really be able to explain it. But what a sweat lodge is it is a ceremony where grandfathers are heated. They're brought into a lodge, and there's a variety of different styles depending on what culture you're from. But water is placed on the rocks, and you're praying in there for 4 rounds or however many rounds the elder who's providing the sweat lodge to the people has the ability to go for. So at a very, very high level, without going into too much detail, overstepping my what I've earned as a person, as an experience in this life, that's kind of how kind of how it is a little bit. But there's so many different ceremonies, Jim. Like there's star lodges, there's Yuipi ceremonies, there's sun dances. Like people in prairies, like they each have their own different style of sun dance. Like there's Cree sun dancers, there's Sioux sun dancers, there's everything. So it's a wide variety, and it all brings healing to the people, and they all have different things that they do as well. So yeah, that's kind of that.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing.
No worries.
Yeah. So you were mentioning that you're like also half Caucasian.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask, like, how do you feel about, I guess, being
half? Yeah, totally. I mean, so to be honest with you, and I've thought about this a lot in mostly my adult years. When I was growing up, I never thought of myself as anything other than Indigenous. Like, it never even occurred to me, really, because as I was attending ceremony my entire life, like, nobody treated me any differently as a kid. Nothing like that. But eventually, when I was an adult and I moved out and I started going to university with you, because of that transition to really existing in kind of like a colonial system, like the colonial university system, I took a step back from ceremony because we were going to school in the summer, actually. And then about a year after I went to university, my dad moved to Alberta and he invited me to attend a Sundance out in Musqueam. And I was so excited to go because it was the first time that I was ever going to get to go to a Sundance in the prairies of Canada. I went to one in North Dakota before, but when I went there, that was the first time I ever really kind of like somebody ever looked at me a little bit differently, kind of. Like, I remember it was so busy, biggest Sundance I've ever seen in my entire life. But somebody came up to me and I was with my dad and he said, your son's Munyao. That means like your son's like a white person. And I never ever up until that point thought of me as any different. And then that sent me down a very, very, very big identity crisis scales for the next years. Like I kind of left going to ceremony after that because I kind of felt like I didn't deserve to be there anymore because of the color of my skin. And I'm slowly kind of overcoming that now, just because what I do know about our culture is that our culture is a culture. It's not a religion. So like, I was talking to a couple people back in Alberta and I was talking to them about this subject in particular. And what they told me was like, our culture is a culture. It's for everybody. You know, everybody is a human on Mother Earth, really, on Turtle Island. And that I'm slowly starting to make my journey back into ceremony now, but it really did mess me up for a little bit because, you know, at the time, my dad did defend me too. He was like, this kid has grown up with ceremony. Like my dad put the guy in his place, but I never thought of myself as differently. And now I've kind of always struggled with it, but I know who I am. I know who I am today. Like I'm Riel Drury. I'm Cree-Métis. My family was right back in the resistance against the government of Canada. And like my people died to have a chance at having some sort of, you know, freedom to guard our life in this country. And I'm very, very proud of that today. And I'll always be.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great, man. That's really great. I guess this is perfect to just move on to the next thing. But I guess in your opinion, what does it mean to be Métis for you? It's kind of like working on and working toward from like those last parts you mentioned.
Yeah. The subject of Métis people, especially lately, has been pretty highly politicized. For me, being Métis has never been political. Like I've never thought about it like that. You know, I really do see us as like, if you learn our history, know what we did at the Battle of Duck Lake and, you know, Batoche, like essentially how Métis people came to be was settlers came. They were exploring. Voyageurs is what they were called. They were exploring. They were hunting for furs. Some worked for the Northwest Trading Company. Some worked for the Hudson Bay Company. And they married into these Indigenous families that were already there. And out of that birthed a culture of that mix. And there's a lot of talk about our language, like Michif, which is pretty much a Creole or a big mix of, Cree, Ojibwe, French, all that different type of stuff. And it kind of all got jumbled up together. But for me, because I grew up with so much of my Cree culture, like ingrained in me, being Métis was always just, like we have our own practices and traditions, but I kind of always remembered what made us special, and what made us special was that we saw that indigenous way of life, that those indigenous way of knowing. We saw what natural law looked like in practice. And natural law is just like, there's a lot of teachings that go along with that. But for me, at a very, very high level, it just means like the conditions of the world and what we can't break as humans, we took that, we recognized that, we knew who we were within that, and we loved that, and we loved that way of life. So for me, being Métis is always remembering that what made us special, like bunny rabbit ears, is that we were indigenous in the first place, and we believed in that culture, and we followed that culture, and we followed the bison, and we lived off the land, and the land was our mother. The Northwest was our mother, which is a great book by Jean Taye. Okay. Who's actually a distant cousin of my family's too.
Oh, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm. So for me, that's what being a Métis person is like. And that actually segues probably into the next question of like why we started this podcast. For me, as a Métis person, it is honestly deep rooted in my DNA. It's my duty to progress Indigenous rights and to safeguard oral tradition and to really be a voice, to be an Indigenous person in this modern colonial world that we exist in. That's what it means to be Métis, and always standing up and doing the right thing for all Indigenous people. That's what it means to be Métis. I don't see myself as any differently. I just see myself as mixed. Mm.
That's fantastic. So yeah, you jumped a bit on like, why did you start this podcast? So I guess another question is, that's great that like this is so why we started this podcast, but it's also, why do you think, I guess, podcasting in specific is the best means, I guess, to this?
I think like excuse me, why podcasting is the best vehicle for this is because, well, like just in terms of my personal skill set, all I really know how to do is to communicate and to talk. But, like oral history and the passing down of stories, that's always been how we've taught the next generation. It's always been how we've mentored the next people to represent our people. And podcasting is beautiful because that's all it really is. It's just us talking together and coming together and sorting out through different ways of thinking or different perspectives or anything like that. And that's why podcasting is a great fit to safeguard and keep oral tradition moving forward. But there's a bunch of reasons why I started this podcast. Like, we can get into it if you want or whatever,
Yeah, we can get into a couple reasons if you have.
Should we? Yeah. Well, I mean, number one, keeping oral traditions alive. I want to document Indigenous stories, Indigenous history, the knowledge of not only elders, but modern day knowledge keepers. And what this podcast is going to do is really be able to document and record and share, how Indigenous people today are maintaining their indigeneity while also existing in a colonial system, and how we're existing to change that, but also how we're overcoming those conditions that were set upon us. So that's like, I would say, one general kind of what we're doing here. At the same time, like I really, 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 really in every cell of my body want this to be a for-profit business. And the reason why I want that is because I want to generate revenue and income so that we can reinvest back into culture so that we can maintain our culture and share it. So like my ultimate vision, my ultimate goal is just to be able to Mr. Beast this whole thing and like be able to generate some income, to be able to generate some revenue, so that way I can go to Musqueam and say, okay, what do you need in order to successfully and without feeling like just reducing the difficulty of providing culture to the people. What do they need? You know, do you need trappers tents? Okay, I'll go buy a few and my guys and I will come and set it up. Like, what do you need? Tell me what you need, and then we can do that. That's one part of the business. That's one part of the business that's one part of the vision that I really want to fulfill. The other thing is that I just really, really, really want to share Indigenous products and grow that within the market. You know, there are so many great Indigenous entrepreneurs out there, and I just want to be able to provide another avenue and another distribution channel for them. That would be such a dream come true for me, you know? So that's another reason of why we're doing it, what the vision looks like for this. You know, I would love to do some magnificent, amazing things. You know, my other mom, so she calls me her chosen son, but it's how I have my ties to the Squamish Nation, where this podcast is being recorded today, is you know, she is from the Homolcheson people who are now tied to Squamish Nation, but you know, they had longhouses on Stanley Park today. You know, I would love, like, this would be, I would be able to die kind of a little bit happier if I could put a longhouse back on Stanley Park today. That would be amazing. Another thing, like, what I would really love to do is be able to buy like 1,000 acres in Alberta and the rolling hills close to the mountains, so that there's a little bit of everything in there. There's a little bit of prairie, there's a little bit of mountain, there's a little bit of stream, and just give it back to the people. Just be like, hey, this is land that's used for ceremony forever. Like, you don't ever have to worry about losing this. You don't ever have to worry about maintaining this. This is for everybody to use. So that way we can all come together and share ceremony together.
Oh, absolutely. And I guess another thing too is, could you maybe speak more on sort of the people that you want to bring on, in terms of, like, besides just Indigenous people? Like, you want to bring, like, from what we were talking about, you wanted to bring a unique, diverse set of voices of Indigenous people from all different types of backgrounds.
Yeah, totally. I mean, because of what happened to us, every Indigenous person has such a unique, different story. So, like, bring on Indigenous artists. There are so many great Indigenous, you know, music producers, carvers, you name it, you know, sewers, you name it. Like, there's so many of those people that have knowledge on those subjects that I think, well, I hope would be willing to share with us on this podcast, so to inspire other people to join in our cultural practices and in our traditions as well. So that's like one kind of subset, is like Indigenous artists, Indigenous creators, what that looks like. You know, the other type of people, like, I would love to have, you know, Indigenous peoples who are directors in banks, or who are leading very large, you know, I would say traditionally colonial organizations as well too. And what they have learned through, you know, them being Indigenous, what that experience was like. Everybody's experience is so unique and so different. So, you know, Indigenous business people, Indigenous workers, Indigenous healthcare providers, that's another great subset too. I could go on forever. Indigenous veterans, elders, of course. There's so many. Any Indigenous person with something to share has a spot on this podcast. I can tell you that for sure.
That's amazing to hear. So, I guess moving forward, what would you like to bring back, like, from the old ways?
Oh, man, Jim, what a loaded question. Oh, man.
You can take your time with this one.
I mean, here's the thing. What I'm very grateful for is that I've grown up in both, you know, I would say a traditional Indigenous system, knowing my culture, and also a colonial system. And I feel like I've learned both systems relatively well, at least I've been exposed to both. What I would like to bring back, there are a bunch of teachings of Indigenous people that we've had forever, like forever. And they're only just starting to kind of emerge in, the colonial world, and it's all big and brand new, and like it's all big, brand new, like hype stuff. And we've had it forever. And I'm just sitting there going like, what you could have asked us and we could have told you, like you could have been humble enough to come to us as Indigenous people. And I guarantee you an Indigenous person always helps another person because they're also another human on Mother Earth. So like, here's a good example of that is like, how you and I have developed like this podcast today, like in particular, how we came to develop this project and this table that we're sitting at. And
from every little aspect.
Yeah. From every little aspect is Scrum project management, right? Mm-hmm. Which is just agile methodology and how you treat a project like it's a circular motion. So that like a user or a person wants something and they want something that's a little bit more prioritized or something else. So you plan out a sprint and you tinker with what you have the resources to do, what you can deliver on, and then you sprint. So you work on that for a defined set of time, so a week or 2 weeks or whatever, and then you revisit it and you say, okay, how did that sprint go? What worked? What didn't work? What's blocking us today? And everything goes in a circle, and you just keep repeating those sprints until you have a great product that you can put out. Man. Indigenous people have been doing that for so long, so long, because we recognize and we have the humility to know that you can't plan for everything. Mm-hmm. Like you cannot plan for everything. Even today, when we were setting up for this, there was like 1,000 things that we did not plan for.
Exactly. Camera angles, lighting,
literally changing it down to the second we already started recording this audio track. So it's like that constant circular, the circular flow of energy. Mm-hmm. That's always been here. It goes on forever. Like, even like nowadays, like there's this big in the parenting world, there's this big thing of like, you can't overlove your kids, like you can't give your kids too much love ever. Well, we knew that for a really long time, like a really, really long time. We knew that, like putting your kid into the corner and shaming them for misbehaving or whatever you deem as misbehavior, not what they deem as misbehavior, that has never, not that it doesn't work. Like great kids are great kids always. Kids are always great, but that might not be the optimal way to show your children that you love them. Mm-hmm. So there's a bunch of teachings like that I would like to bring back from the old ways. And honestly, like the other thing I would like to bring back from the old ways is literally just like the teaching of listening. When I'm hosting these podcasts, like what I'm super grateful for that is that I have the opportunity to sit here and listen. And I feel like we don't listen to each other enough. So if I could bring one thing back, it would just be the teaching of listening and just knowing that you don't have to respond right away. You can listen to somebody and just be like, respectfully say, oh, like, let me take that back. Let me think about it. Let me sit on it, and I'll come back to you when I'm ready to speak. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You don't have to. There's no rush. Yeah. Like I was just reading this book. It's called The 4 Agreements. You ever heard of it?
I have not heard of it.
Well,
who's it by? If you remember,
Louise. I forget his last name, but the first agreement that you should hold with yourself in order to have a fulfilled life is be impeccable with your word. That's like traditional Indigenous knowledge, like sometimes you can just speak and sit there and listen and consider that person's experience before you actually jump into it and start debating, whereas like the colonial system is like, court date today, like make a decision today, go discuss it, jury, like that type of thing. But listen to the story, hear it, interpret it, and then push it back out. I'm going to keep going. I'm on a roll right now. Here's another one. If I could bring back another thing is that we don't, I've never actually had the opportunity to receive this teaching, but I've just kind of been researching it on the back end myself from like an academic standpoint, is like the teaching of breathing, like Indigenous peoples and our way of life and our food source, like there's so many journals of settlers and colonists that came here and was like, wow, all these Indigenous people here have such perfect teeth and perfect stuff. And it's like, yeah, well, that was a little bit on purpose because, we were eating foods that were nutritious. Like food is medicine to us. We always knew that. And then, we gave ourselves and our abilities to develop as humans. And that's kind of like, and that ties into breathing because, we knew how to take care of our faces and our sinuses and, what the power of breath can do, and slowing your breath to be able to really bring yourself into the present moment. And I could go on forever, but that's just another example.
Yeah, I think in particular, I think that's a really good Indigenous teaching, and it should be brought back.
I'm not a teacher, just to be clear. I'm not an Indigenous teacher. I am just an Indigenous person that is here to bear witness and to provide a platform to other Indigenous people. So I'm never going to provide a teaching to another person because I have not earned any right to do so.
Yeah. So, what do you want future generations, to think about moving forward? I guess from this very moment.
I don't know what I want future generations to think about, but what I want our generation to think about today, the youth of our generation to think about is, I just want everybody to know that whatever you want for your life, there is a reality where you can go out there and get it, no matter what condition that the world has put on you already today. You can go out there and you can get it, and you can secure whatever you want. It just takes a lot of work. There's a word in Cree like akimeamok, which means, don't stop till the job is done. So every single time I call my dad to talk about this podcast, that's what he says to me. Just get out there, do it. It takes work.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going through that constant iteration.
Creator takes care of those who take care of themselves too. Just having that accountability and just knowing who you are as an Indigenous person, and you have the ability to create what you want in this life. If I could give that to everybody, and then also to know just to not judge others for anything that they do, because everybody has their own experience and everybody's on their own journey in this world. And we just have to get to this point where we can listen to each other and acknowledge that that's a real experience, and that maybe, we don't know everything about that experience, and maybe you'll never know everything about that experience. But just listening, acknowledging it, and acknowledging that's real for other people.
If you can draw a vision for Indigenous peoples, what would it look like?
Yeah, I think about this so much. Like my goal I like to think of myself as a future Indigenous leader, but my goal is that I want a reality where, Indigenous peoples are rich in whatever way they see fit. I always think about my brothers. So like one of my brothers is from Grand Rapids, and what would make me happy is for boys like him and I, you can live on your home community if you want to. You don't have to leave to go, get a job in the city if you don't want to. He could go to work at home remotely. And then after he's done working at home, as kids come home from school, he could take his kids hunting, or he can take his kids out back and skin a hide if he wants to, or he can do whatever he wants to do as an Indigenous person. He can live the life he can live the life that he wants, not have to move wherever he has to do to get a job or anything like that. Like recently he went to Alberta to get a job, and he recently moved back, but just having that freedom to practice your own traditions and also to exist in the colonial system in whatever way you see fit, not what other people tell you, that's what I want for Indigenous people. And that culture is at the center of all of that.
That is fantastic. Well, not sure. I think that's a great closing statement. Do you have any other closing thoughts?
Nope, I do not have any other closing thoughts, to be honest with you. There's a spider on the table.
Still got some work on this.
Yeah, still got some work. Where are the spider webs?
But yes, thank you, man. This has been absolutely fantastic, and it's great to just sit down.
Thank you. I mean, for everybody that doesn't know, like I'm so grateful for you, man. Like I know that I'm not the easiest person to work with. I know that you know that, but one of the things that I can appreciate about you is that when everybody talks about reconciliation, I'm sure you heard that, but I just want you to know that you're actually actively living it, because you're here putting in the work, supporting a vision that hasn't even came to be yet. We don't even know if it's going to, but we're going to die trying. So
yeah, no, absolutely. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it. And the journey has been absolutely amazing so far. And I look forward to just expanding this thing and spreading the word and bringing back the culture in a greater way than it currently is.
Keenan Askaman, I'm grateful for you, Jim.